Hello, welcome to another episode of Surprising Buildings, and today we're going to show you one of my favorite buildings, not only in the Czech Republic, but on the whole planet. And the great news for you is that you can quite easily visit it yourself. We're in Prague, specifically in Prague 6 in Střešovice, in Nad Hradním Vodojemem Street. And we came to look at this house you see behind me, the so-called Müller villa, which was built here between 1928 and 1930. And it's a house that I don't think attracts much attention from the outside. And if it does, it's more negative than positive. I've heard a lot of opinions where somebody says, well, a cube like this with some weirdly scattered windows. Why should we care? Why would we care? You'll see the day inside. I think I've mentioned several times in our series that in the 20th century there were basically only two original concepts of how to arrange space for living. One is by Le Corbusier, called Plan Libre, or Free Plan, and the other is by Adolf Loos, the designer of this building, and it's called Raumplan, or Space Plan. If you look at it from the outside, the house looks really simple. The windows are a bit strange, but inside you are in for a big surprise. In our series, we have already shown you Adolf Loos's apartments in Pilsen, which you can visit and you can watch our episode. Or you've also seen a tour of the Winternitz villa by the same author here in Prague. But where we're going to go today, that's really his crowning work, where he was able to demonstrate this original idea the best. The fact that he had a great builder, the owner of a large construction company, who built the house himself and worked very well with the architect on it, contributed a lot to that. When people talk about Adolf Loos, the author of this building, they naturally talk about him as an important, significant architect who realized many great things, who still arouses interest today. If I were to introduce him to you, I would introduce him to you as a man with excellent taste, perhaps the best taste of his time. And this is such thin ice because every time you say taste, good taste, a lot of people will say it doesn't exist. Everybody has different tastes. You can't say which is better or which is worse. No, it's not like that. It's completely different. It's that there's great taste and bad taste. And this person had really great taste. He was absolutely perfect in materials, in colors, in theory, in all different things, in craft, in how things are made. And he was a man who had an eye for new emerging talent. He discovered Arnold Schoenberg, Oskar Kokoschka. These were people that he, as a patron, supported at a time when nobody else thought they were important. And here he had the opportunity with a builder who had a big budget and also great taste to bring his most radical ideas to fruition. Adolf Loos was a radical, a provocateur. One of his provocations can be seen outside. When somebody looked at the house from the outside like that, they said, well, it doesn't look very interesting. The facade is not very well composed. I could probably do that too. Like, what's so special about it? And why isn't the facade better? So Adolf Loos said, I don't live on the facade. I don't do it for the people who walk by. I do it for the people who ordered it. And I do it so that they can live well inside. You should take a chair sometime and sit in the middle of the street in the rain and enjoy the facade. Nobody does that. We are located on a plot that is almost 1,300 square meters. The second characteristic thing is that there is an 11-meter elevation change, so there is really no flatness, but instead a steep slope, quite difficult to establish. The house is placed in such a part of that lot that it is the furthest away from its neighbors. It's partially recessed below street level, So when you enter through the gate in the fence, you have to come down, and you find yourself at one of the most beautiful entrances to a house you'll ever see. And it's the kind of entrance you can't see. So you're moving through the surrounding streets and the house looks like a kind of impregnable fortress, a castle with tiny windows. The windows aren't that small because the volume of the house is very big, but at least it looks like that. At the same time, the house is set in a beautiful garden designed by 3 great landscape architects. And that garden has a whole range of principles and color similarities with the interior. That is, it's tuned together. It's not like a house and a garden. They're things that are very closely related. The basic austere mass of the building is occasionally broken by exception. Behind me you can see the bay window from the dining room, so part of it juts out to give the dining room a little more light. Above you see a false window, a distinctive framing that is situated on a specific building here in Prague. And then there are these breaks in these niches. One hides the main entrance, the other hides the entrance to the garage. It's not just the simple thing. The simple thing is sometimes broken like that. And I think the windows with their distinctive yellow tint play a key role. Adolf Loos wasn't really afraid of color, and they have a kind of subtle rasterization, a zoning that's a little bit reminiscent of Japan, and that's not a total coincidence either. Adolf Loos loved stone. He grew up in his dad's masonry shop, and it shows beautifully here, and we'll see it a few more times. And I think this is a really great entry. When you're down here like this, recessed in front of the street so nobody can see you from the outside, you can sit on a travertine bench like this and be hidden under the roof, and you can possibly wait for a visitor to come up here. I think that's a really generous input that says that the contact between the inside and the outside is a serious thing. Right at the entrance you will discover 2 of the interesting principles that run through the house. The first is that color is really important, and that Adolf Loos was extremely dedicated to it and didn't go for some simple primitive combinations. A lot of people think that architects dress in black and the interiors are going to be black and white the way it looks from the outside. No, here on the inside they work with a whole range of beautiful colors and materials. When you walk in here, you immediately see the repeating green tiles, the glass. But at the same time, we've entered a very small, dark space, a kind of an anteroom. It's really a small, compressed thing, like you're entering a submarine. Maybe the first reaction is where I find myself. It looked quite big from the outside, and here it's kind of small, dark. That's probably not a big deal. Let's move on. From the small, colourful hallway, you enter a slightly larger hall, which is very bright, has a beautiful blue ceiling, excellent light fixtures from František, a window that connects you to the outside, which is covered with the kind of delicate yellow silk curtains found throughout the house. And I'm sitting on this little sofa, but it's accentuated and monumentalized by being framed by 2 blocks, something we'll see a few more times today. From the entrance hall you continue on down a very narrow staircase which is at a low, clear height, and suddenly the space gradually begins to open up. And at that moment you enter the fantastic, largest living space in the whole house, from the smallest to the largest. The exact dimensions of this living space are 11 x 5.60, that is 61.6 square meters, which for comparison is the size of the apartment I have lived in with my family of 3 for the last 10 years. and we live there very happily. So one of these spaces corresponds to that. And it's an extremely elevated space, and it's really monumentalized by a whole series of very smart decisions. One of those key decisions is that the middle of this large living space is basically empty, and the important places to sit are on the sides. They have different formats, different colors. None of them are repeated here. Basically, the author said you're supposed to have a choice, and depending on your mood, you pick what's good for you. And the seats are very low, so you sit very low to the ground. It's also been criticized at times, saying it's too low, it's hard to get up from. And Adolf Loos said, if you can get out of your present car and its low seating, you can get out of my furniture. Here you can experience for the first time what the Loos spatial plan or Raumplan actually means. The idea is quite simple, he said. There are different activities going on in the house, different situations, and they don't need the same clearance. And these things of different heights need to fit together to create this simple form on the outside. But it's not simple on the inside. It's quite an interesting, complex spatial labyrinth that's connected by different staircases, landings of different heights. And you find as you walk through here that the spatial experience is incredibly rich.
The spatial experience is incredibly rich.
I've already mentioned that the stone plays an important role here, and the most important role is this particular one, Cipollino marble from Switzerland. A very special thing with a high iron ore content. That means fragile stuff. That's why there was a big problem cutting it into thin slabs. But Adolf Loos decided to put as much of it as possible. Those who know Adolf Loos very little have him associated with a statement that has been misinterpreted, namely, ornament is a crime. He never said it explicitly, but he is the author of a famous essay called Ornament and Crime. And he often just mentions there that we should avoid ornaments, because instead he uses this, which is not an ornament, but the structure of the material. But it has a somewhat similar role, so he was saying that it can be simple, but the material should stand out to the full. It shouldn't be covered by some paint or tiling. It impresses itself with its beauty. Looking from the outside, we mentioned that the windows look quite small. I think a lot of people would think it would be very dark inside. It's not. You'll find that those individual window openings and doors aren't that small, but they're quite cleverly placed. For example, here they lead out onto a balcony that has a full wall balustrade, so this opening looks relatively small when viewed from the outside, but it's not. Interestingly enough, this main outward view is facing purely north, so basically to where the sun doesn't shine, but the decision was clear. It's to the Troy Basin, to a beautiful valley, to an interesting view, and not across to the neighbors. So that location was given priority over the cardinal directions. After we've spent some time in the main living room, we can take the stairs to the upper levels, not actually to the other rooms because they're not separate rooms, but they really do flow seamlessly into each other, and there are no doors. So there's no door to the hallway, no door to the staircase, no door to anywhere else. So this way I can gradually enter the dining room, which has a different clearance, as we mentioned, but it's part of this large space. We are in the dining room, where the circular dining table plays an important role. Its base is made of syenite, is made of stone, has a diameter of 1.10 meters and can seat 6 people around it. Then it can be extended with this mahogany intermediate ring, and it can extend by 60 centimeters. Then there are 12 people, or another 60, and then there are 18 people. So this circular form, a relatively small table, can host a very large company around it. In this space, the material plays an important role, specifically the mahogany that can be seen on the ceiling. One of Loos's clients once bragged and said, "Mr. Loos, I did it just like you. I have a mahogany ceiling in my dining room and it's just beautiful. Come and see it." Adolf Loos came in there and said, "It's terrible, it looks like a coffin lid because you have it in a small space and you can't use a dark material like that for a ceiling in a small space. I used it in Müller's villa, but because it was part of a low space, but it opens into the main living space and still gets light from the side from the bay window, so I could afford it." I love that explanation because it's happened many times in my life when I've been describing something and someone says, wait a minute, you said something completely different last time, and I say yes, but that was elsewhere. In the dining room we can see how important working with symmetry was for Loos. There's a cabinet like this, which if you open up you'll find that it contains glasses and service so that you can use it in the dining room. And on the other side there's a very similar cabinet, but it's not a cabinet, it's instead a connection to the food prep room, which is such an austere, simple, utilitarian space, but it's really beautiful, with one of the first refrigerators, by the way. The staircase plays a fundamental role in Loos's spatial concept, of course, as its role is to connect these different levels into one self-evident whole. And in terms of design, this is the beautiful work of architect Jan Vanek and his firm Standard Bytova Společnost Brno. I am currently on one of the mezzanines of the main staircase, and you can go in different directions from here. At this point you can really feel a little bit like you're in a maze, and I think you're beginning to understand the Raumplan, the spatial plan. So there's another service staircase behind that door that goes all the way through the house, and it served a lot of the servants so that they could get from the kitchen to the pantry and to the utility room comfortably. And these two doors lead into two very different and remarkable spaces, one to the men's study, the other to the ladies' salon. We are in the master's study, the library, and a kind of little parlour of the master of the house, who could check what was going on in the street and what visitors were coming through this big window. Again, a work of symmetry, two big leather couches behind which safes were hidden. I like the detail of the big white projection screen here, so this is where they used to project the first things on the wall to view the big plans of the construction company. So kind of a closed, heavy, serious world. We'll move on to the ladies' lounge in a moment and see the significant difference. At the moment we are in what is probably the most beautiful room of the whole house, the ladies' parlour, a place that really served the owner's most intimate visitors. And although it's a tiny space, it has two different height levels. It's helped tremendously by the warm wood, the lemon tree veneer that surrounds it like this. And there are subtle, beautiful details, including the fact that you can sit in this, you could say alcove, which is a little bit like a train compartment, because there's even a window that pulls down like a train, so you can pull it down and you can listen to what's going on in the next room. Or sometimes there's a band playing so that that sound carries into the main lounge. And one of the nicest details that's here is that there's still a separate private staircase behind this door that the owner could use to descend into the room when there was an important social event going on. So she has two options, two accesses, two staircases. We climbed the staircase to the other rooms, which are now mainly private, so I am now entering the owner's bedroom. Adjoining the bedroom are two beautiful dressing rooms, one for men and one for women. We have just entered the children's world, and it is a clear proof that Adolf Loos was not afraid of colours and knew how to combine them perfectly. There's a room for 2 children and their shared playroom, and behind me is an element that is currently a quarantine area. When a child was sick, behind that frosted curtain they could gradually recover. The staircase itself is really beautiful. If you remember, I said downstairs that there are basically no doors, but here it's completely different. There are 7 doors on this floor. It gives you some idea of the vastness of this building, because this is not even the last floor. We are currently on the top level of the whole building, which is a sort of summer dining room, but you could say a Japanese lounge. The Müllers had a great art collection that's partly on display here, and Adolf Loos was inspired by it to design a space like this to match it. At the same time, you can go out onto the roof terrace, which is bigger than originally intended because the building authority cut some things down on this level, so that roof terrace today is about 2/3 of the area of the whole house, and it certainly offered a fantastic view of the whole of Prague, including one special view of Prague Castle. After the Second World War, the villa suffered a less happy fate than under the Müller family's ownership. It was nationalized, there were offices here, it gradually decayed, but fortunately in 1995 an important decision was made. The villa was bought by the city of Prague, and today it is managed by the Museum of the City of Prague. It has been extensively and expensively reconstructed by the team of Professor Václav Gilza. This reconstruction was completed in 2000, and thanks to this demanding process it is in a great condition today, so you can visit it, and I think that is quite important news. I found myself here today with 4 members of our staff, and they were all here for the first time, so I assume this doesn't just apply to them but to a number of you who are watching us, and if you've never been here before, please correct that.